When you ask people where they're from, sometimes it offends them, because according to them, it's like you're reducing them to no more than their ethnic background, as if that's their only value to you. Or you're just curious. Could also be that. Could also be that you're trying to establish a cultural baseline for conversation that allows you to come at it from a place of understanding and perspective rather than ignorance. Could also be that. Could also be that it's just plain fucking interesting where people are from and how they grew up and how their cultures affected their lives. Could also be that. For people that I assume are proud of their heritage, they sure aren't keen on sharing it sometimes. It's only the super left-wingers that get offended by questions like that. People who are obsessed with group identity right up until someone asks them what theirs is, and then they're all like, why can't you just see me as an individual? Well, right now I can only see you as a hypocrite. I saw a tweet that inspired this topic from an Asian chick on Twitter saying in all caps, stop asking Asians what kind of Asian they are. It's 2018. I don't know what kind of Asian she is because she wouldn't let me ask her. And I really don't see what the current year has to do with anything. Like, okay, it's 2018. Does that mean we're already supposed to be able to guess? There are 48 Asian countries in the world. Jackie Chan can't even tell you all apart. I'm white and I can't tell by looking whether someone's Norwegian or Dutch or Scottish or Canadian. This isn't a racist problem. It's a nobody studies facial recognition that extensively problem. Assuming there are even distinct enough traits to distinguish between ethnically similar nationalities. People ask you where you're from because it's an interesting aspect of conversation. It can branch into history, culture, sociology, all kinds of avenues ripe with insight and learning opportunities, but by all means get indignant about curiosity and respond to it with aggression. That's sure to bridge the divide between us. Harry Kondabolu, or however you say either of those names, literally closes his latest stand-up special on Netflix with a bit about that exact mentality, proudly railing against someone who dared to ask him where he was from, to cheers from the audience when he reveals that the guy who asked him that randomly died a couple weeks later. Then he gets a round of applause after implying his wokeness might have had something to do with the guy's death somehow. I love the irony of that whole special because it's like 40 minutes of this is where I'm from, followed by 10 minutes of don't ever ask me where I'm from or I'll inadvertently kill you. W. Kamau Bell is another one. I just learned he co-hosts a podcast with Harry Kondabalbalu, which is one of the less surprising things I've ever heard. First of all, his name is Walter. That's the W. It's Walter Kamau Bell, but you abbreviate it trying to be F. Scott Fitzgerald or some shit. I've never thought he was funny, even back when I was more liberal than I am now. I watched Totally Biased in 2013. It was a bad show. I watched his latest Netflix special, Private School Negro, and to my credit, I got about 20 minutes in after listening to nonstop race baiting, all the while knowing this guy goes home to his white wife every night, who must just be the wokest motherfucker on the planet if she can tolerate that bullshit. Boy, do I never in my life want to meet the white woman who married Walter Kamau Bell and signed away her right to parent their mixed child. He specifically talks in his special about how there are some things his wife can't teach her own fucking flesh and blood daughter because she's too white. That would be divorce grounds for me. If you're white and you marry someone who isn't white and they want to tell you to essentially keep your whiteness out of your child's development, sue for custody. That is absolutely outrageous and unconscionable. Chris Rock can be just as anti-white, but at least he's still funny. Tambourine was a great special. Based on recent news and my current topic, you probably had to know we were going to talk about Sarah Jeong next. If you don't know, Sarah Jeong is the New York Times' most recent hire, and she's become the latest victim of tweet-digging outrage similar to James Gunn and Dan Harmon and everyone else it's been happening to, with one major difference, which is that she's a verifiable piece of shit human being. Sarah Jeong is Asian, though I probably shouldn't ask what kind, and the tweets of hers that were dug up, which by the way are 3 years old, not 10 like James Gunn, as in not that old, are exceedingly anti-white sentiments. I'm talking things like literally cancel white people, and white men are bullshit, and dumbass fucking white people marking up the internet with their opinions like dogs pissing on fire hydrants. The New York Times knew about these tweets, which also includes insults flung at other New York Times writers who are now her colleagues, so that's fun. The New York Times knew about these tweets, hired her anyway, and is standing by their decision to do so and not firing her. Now, I don't think she should be fired. People really need to stop being fired for tweets and start being fired for shit they do with their actual jobs. I don't think they ever should have hired her to begin with either, but now that they have made that decision, they better stick with it, or else the outrage mob is going to be satiated once more and emboldened to continue the fight against employment for terrible people. Here's the thing about terrible people, they should still be able to have jobs. If terrible people couldn't get jobs, there would be no CEOs and we would have no airport security. So many positions would be vacant and our country would collapse. You can hate them, but you can't fire them unless they are actively a detriment to your bottom line. Sarah Jeong is garbage. Make no mistake. And I'm racist for saying that somehow, according to those who would defend her comments, which aren't jokes, by the way. They're not. I've seen all kinds of jokes in my lifetime, and those ain't it. White men are bullshit isn't a joke. It's a statement. I make jokes about black people, but they're never just like black men are bullshit. That's an overtly racist sentiment. The subject is white men, and the punchline is you vehemently dislike them, with nothing in between, which is deplorable. But people call us racist for then condemning actual racism. And lest we forget, racism is discrimination, prejudice, or antagonism directed at a member of a different race based on feelings of superiority regarding your own race. Which, white people are a race. I shouldn't have to say that, but here we are. And if you think another race is bullshit, you probably don't think your own race is bullshit, which would elevate it in your mind to a level of superiority at least slightly higher than bullshit. But that's the mentality of a lot of people on the far left, that white people are inherently guilty of building a white supremacist society only we can thrive in, even though Asian Americans and particularly Indian Americans make more money than us on average. We are 62% of the United States population, and we are both at the very highest and very lowest end of the economic spectrum, just like every other race of people in America. We have billionaires and we have homeless people. Ask a white homeless person if he's checked his privilege recently. See how that goes over. Just last week, some black guy made headlines for punching a white dude on a bus specifically because he was white. His words. How are you going to tell me that's not a hate crime? And then people will be like, well, in order to be a hate crime, it has to be more than just a crime motivated by hate. Yeah, no, I don't think it does, given that there aren't more words in the phrase hate crime than the two you just mentioned. Andy Richter just posted a huge Twitter thread. You may know Andy Richter as the guy on Conan that isn't Conan. Like a 15-tweet thread about how what Sarah Jeong did was rude, but can't be racist because we have a laundry list of privileges forever. And then he was replying to people that were saying, hey, have you checked a dictionary recently? He replied to them by dismissing literalism entirely. Dude, once you throw literalism out of language, all you're left with is interpretation, and that can't sustain itself in any structured capacity. Once you brush aside what words actually mean and operate solely on feelings, you've opened yourself up to a world of intangible, undefinable hurt. For a political side of the spectrum that's so protective of feelings, you'd think you would do whatever you could to avoid exposing them rather than stripping away the literalist armor and leaving them perpetually vulnerable. It's completely counterproductive to your agenda and you don't even realize it. Institutional racism exists. In small, separate, compact, and discrete forms. It is not a system-wide bias. It does not envelop the whole country in one giant blanket of discrimination, but if you think that it does, you're lucky, because it means you don't have to lift a finger to stop it. It's an inevitability. What's scope is far out of your control. All you can do is retweet hashtags and shout into the ether about the evil puppet masters that are preventing you from making money or finding opportunities, because hey, it doesn't matter what you do in the aisle as long as you're on the right side of it. If you want to actually make a difference by combating the small, separate, compact, and discrete forms of institutional racism, you seek it out, shine a light on it, record it, expose it. Dwayne Perkins recently did exactly that. He noticed that whenever he went to a particular pharmacy, the customer service button on each aisle would be pressed as soon as he walked into it, without fail, and an employee would try to inconspicuously hover around the area and watch him, probably to make sure a black guy didn't steal anything. This happened on multiple occasions, so one day he went there with his phone camera in his cart and recorded the entire thing. It happened exactly as before, and he finally asked to speak to a manager and called them out on it, at which point another black customer who was a stranger entered the conversation and said that she had also been followed around the store before. The manager and employees of course denied everything, but the recordings were uploaded to Twitter and circulated. I'm not sure if anyone was fired, I don't know if any resolution was achieved, but at least people know not to go there anymore. You have to name your enemies. It's that old proverb I forget. But that's a great example of actually doing something to fight institutional bias, and I want to see it happening a lot more, instead of people just whining about how rigged everything is, which is the only explanation for why they're a worthless human being who can't contribute anything to society but a hashtag. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.